the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, broken mirrors leap back together in string dimension 15 undulation, but now all the actual things they are reflected are broken or look not quite right. Worn out snubs of smoky days ditch the pathos and shout a pugilistic warning.
Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon and Steve Miller. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Baen Senior Editor Tony Daniel.
And I'm Baen Intern Charlie Smith.
Hi, Charlie. This time we talk with Travis S. Taylor, scientist, TV personality, and author of exciting fiction. Travis discusses Bringers of Hell, the sixth entry in the Tau Ceti Agenda series, out now from booksellers.
And we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Sharon and Steve Miller's Liaden Universe novels, Alliance of Equals.
First, here's the news. Hey, the February hardcovers looked out and saw their shadows, but they were too dang powerful and great to go back into their nest. That's because it's Groundhog's Day today, by the way. It's hatching time also for the February hardcovers. Out now in hardcover is Bringers of Hell, which, as we said, is the sixth entry in the Tau Ceti Agenda by Travis S. Taylor. Why don't you tell us about that, Charlie?
Despite unprecedented victories on the part of humanity, the war with the alien Chiata horde drags on. The Chiata may be bewildered by the cunning tenacity of General Alexander Moore and the men and women who fight at his side, but they have no intention of beating a hasty retreat. In fact, intelligence suggests that the Chiata invasion is at hand, and with numbers sure to overwhelm humankind. Meanwhile, mech-suited Marine warrior Deanne Moore wages a personal war on the Chiata. Grievously wounded in the battle for Thagreet and rebuilt with state-of-the-art cybernetics, she leads a strike force known as the Bringers of Hell. Dee is now Phoenix, reborn as an implacable scourge to the Chiata, and nothing will stand in the way of her mission, to make the aliens pay.
We will hear even more on Bringers of Hell with Travis shortly. Also out in February is 1637 The Volga Rules by Eric Flint, Paula Goodlett, and Gorg Huff. Tell us about that one, Charlie.
It's been 5 years since the cosmic incident known as the Ring of Fire transported the modern-day town of Grantville, West Virginia, through time and space to 17th century Europe. The course of world history has been forever altered, and Mother Russia is no exception. Inspired by the American uptimers' radical notion that all people are created equal, Russian serfs are rebelling. The entire village of Poltz, led by blacksmith Stefan Androvich, picks up stakes to make a run for freedom. The path is dangerous, for the serfs as well as the Tsar, but the worst threat are those in the aristocracy who seek to crush the serfs and execute the Tsar in a bid to drive any hope for Russian freedom under their Parisian-crafted boot heels. But the Russians of 1637 have taken inspiration from their uptimer counterparts, and it could be that a new wind of liberty is about to blow 3 centuries early and change Mother Russia forever.
Bringers of Hell by Travis S. Taylor, and 1637 The Volga Rules by Eric Flint, Paula Goodlett, and Gorg Huff are now at booksellers everywhere. Want to welcome Travis S. Taylor, Ph.D., to the podcast. Hello, Travis, and lots of other letters, too, after your name. Hi, Travis.
Hey, how's it going?
Travis S. Taylor is the co-creator and star of the National Geographic's hit series that was called The Rocket City Rednecks. He can be seen on the Weather Channel's Three Scientists Walk Into a Bar. And I want you to tell me about any other TV projects you have in a moment. Let me just, Travis is a physicist who has worked on various programs for the Department of Defense and NASA for the past 20 years. His expertise includes advanced propulsion concepts, very large space telescopes, space-based beamed energy systems, cool, future combat technologies, and next-generation space launch concepts. Travis is the author of the groundbreaking Warp Speed series with entries Warp Speed and the Quantum Connection. He's also the creator of the Tau Ceti Agenda series, including One Good Soldier, the Tau Ceti Agenda, One Day on Mars, Trail of Evil, Kill Before Dying, and now at booksellers everywhere. The latest entry in that series is Bringers of Hell. but Travis, are you doing any TV at the moment? What's going on with your photogenic career?
Yeah, well, so you can see me on several Ancient Aliens episodes that will be coming up soon. In fact, I'm going to film 3 more of them here in a couple of weeks. And I just finished a new show for the History Channel that's going to start airing in March. Can't tell you the title of it yet because they made me sign all kind of agreements and stuff, and there's a competitive program out there on a different channel. So, but they'll start advertising for it within the next few weeks, and we'll see it soon.
Okay. Well, that sounds cool. So this is the one that we still can't know the title of yet.
Yes, that's correct.
But it has something. It's going to be on the History Channel. That'll be great. We'll be looking forward to tying in all your books and promoting with that as much as we can as well. So in Bringers of Hell, Travis, we are a long way away from the beginning of this series and even of Trail of Evil. Can you kind of tell us where we are as the book begins? We are a long way into the story now.
Yeah, so the whole series started way back when little Deanna Moore was, I'm trying to remember, she was like 6 or 8 years old. And we move forward on into the future now, and she's pushing 30. I mean, she's like in her upper 20s at this point. And you know, in this universe, they're not supposed to be able to volunteer for combat duty until they're 26 years old, and without consent of their parents. And she became a pilot right out of the cadet, out of being a fresh out of Marine combat training, and she's been involved in combat pretty much since she was a little girl, because the very first battle she saw, she was on vacation on Mars, and that's when all hell broke loose in this in the United States of the Sol system, it's 300 years in the future from now. So at this point, we're on up, and she's a grown woman, and a lot has happened. Without too many spoilers in there, suffice it to say there's a pending alien invasion coming, and the aliens have pretty much destroyed the man she loves and her closest friend, and she's decided that she is going to bring hell to every one of those aliens and kill every one of them herself.
Yeah, this is in a lot of ways, this is just Dee Moore's story. She's a great character in it. And before we go any farther, maybe I should mention also that we have a great sort of adjunct story that's about Deanna Moore on the Baen website right now that's called Pain is the Fuel, right? Where we get a lot of insight into what's making Dee Moore tick.
Yeah, right. I really like writing Deanna. The Moores, all the characters in this series that have survived all 6 books, they've been so much fun to write. And the ones that had to die, I hated. Some of them were so amazing, I hated killing them off. But yeah, at the end of Kill Before Dying, Deanna was sort of becoming who she was going to be in Bringers of Hell. She was completely distraught, completely depressed, post-traumatic stress syndrome. She'd lost everything, and her mentor and wingman, Jack Death Ray Boland. Well, Death Ray told her that she didn't have time to be sad. It was time to be angry, because they were going to go out there and they were going to kill every one of those aliens before dying. And so Bringers of Hell is her taking on that persona of the demon that's for these aliens, and she is literally going to bring them hell.
So what happened to her, and what happened on the Greet? That was what was going on in the previous book, right?
Yeah, the Greet. Yeah, I noticed you guys have left an H off. It's the Grief, like tooth, but it's Thagreeth. Anyway, the Thagreeth, that wasn't the planet. The Thagreeth were on all sorts of planets. They were just on a planet that the Thagreeth had lived on. And when the Chiata alien horde had come through, it's just sheer numbers. They decided it was no longer worth staying and fighting them for that planet, and they left. But they had left some of their technology on that planet behind in their ruins, in their city ruins, and that was one of the reasons. Well, that was the reason that humanity had gone there, was to try and get some kind of secret weapon to fight the alien horde, the Chiata horde, and who are way outnumber humanity, and the technology is beyond humanity. Imagine humanity fighting a bunch of supermen, you know. I mean, it's that bad. Although these are mean, ugly-looking aliens that they glow and all sorts of crazy stuff. They look like demons. Anyway, during that battle, Deanna got shot down on a extreme forested region of a planet that was basically uninhabited. It was just swarming with the Chiata, and she ended up going toe-to-toe, fighting the Chiata hand-to-hand for the better part of this mission by herself, many on one in a bunch of cases, and literally in the end, she fought off about 6 Chiata, but they ended up almost killing her and paralyzing her, but she managed to have her suit walk her into the ruins, and she discovered a way to communicate with the Thagreeth. They weren't dead, they had just moved away, and they gave her a gift, which was basically technology that was a Chiata killer, and it was just a little pet, like a little beetle, only say the size of maybe your cell phone or your fist, but not much bigger than that. And it's her pet that she carries around with her, and it helps her in times of need.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the technology a little bit as well, because you do cool technology. This warfare, this quantum tech, it feels like real science, real possible weapons and tactics in the future. It's different than a lot of, just space battles you might see or read, because they have real science they're relying on, and it changes the way they behave and the sorts of fighting they do, right?
Yeah, that's right. It took me, I developed a complete set of combat skills and tactics. I watched a lot of dogfight documentaries and naval battle documentaries and hand-to-hand infantry type documentaries to studied a lot about combat tactics, and then thought, well, now, okay, if you could create a technology where your fighter plane was a lot like an electron, where you could cause it to be location to be uncertain. So it would be bouncing around in location, jumping in and out of real space about a particular trajectory. They would make it extremely difficult to target. And if you learned how to use that as a strategy and a tactic, then it would make you an overwhelming force with a small number of these fighters against, huge numbers of normal type fighters. This is what you'd call a force multiplier in military jargon. And that's what I had to do. I was thinking about, because this is an ultimate asymmetric war where humanity is so outnumbered by, an order of millions to one. And so they have to figure out a way to create huge force multipliers in order to make a dent in this invasion. So you imagine your wingman and you are flying along a particular trajectory path, and you're bouncing in and out of reality space, appearing, a kilometer to your left, 3 kilometers behind you 1 second, 7 kilometers in front of you another second, and all the while moving at velocities that are beyond orbital velocity of a planet. So imagine what that would take, the skill, the physical abilities, the mental faculties, and emotional control that these pilots would have to be able to handle.
Yeah. And the constantly being in one place and then in another, and the possibility that you can leave when things get hairy, but you don't want to leave too soon.
Evacuation techniques, certainly they can flash out and go back to the mothership, or as long as they've been to the place previously, they can snap back, as I call it. That's the technology. It's called sling forward and snap back. You can sling forward so far based on how powerful your transmitter is, and then you can snap back to anywhere you've been, and that you've recorded the location in your quantum teleportation device.
And all of this is,
so if you realize that your fighter plane is about to get it destroyed and they've got your number, if you have time to snap back, then you would, to the hangar bay of your carrier ship, your super carrier, then you could jump in another fighter and get back in the mix.
And all of this is not just magic you're pulling out of your hat. This is extrapolation based on science we know right now, right?
Yes. Everything is based on the concept of quantum entanglement and quantum teleportation, which has been demonstrated in a laboratory with beams of light. I've done an experiment myself where we've transported pieces of light from one side of a room all the way to the other side of the room instantaneously. And that's the idea here is 300 years in the future, I'm extrapolating that we've learned how to do that now with material objects. And in fact, humanity actually didn't do it 300 years in the future. They had a little help from an alien that was 1 million years older. And so you can see that, you can use the old cliche that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I say it the other way around. I say there's no such thing as magic. They're just They're just sufficiently advanced technologies.
Another technology, one of the cool parts of the book are the Mecha-Suits. And you have actually built a homemade Mecha-Suit. I know because I saw you do it on TV. What are these things? What can these things do?
Yeah, well, so they have armored infantry, the armored environmental suit Marines. They each wear armored, force-enhancing, strength-enhancing, speed-enhancing, weapons-equipped, and sensors-equipped suits that would make Iron Man jealous. And they also, as each book progressed, there were 6 years or so between each of the books in the series. So 36 years after the first book, then we're at a technology, the suits are even better. They actually have developed a personal shield technology that they've reverse engineered from the Chiata. And so they actually have shields on their armor suits that will withstand significant hits until their power runs out, and then they're just down to pure old metal armor, But it's futuristic metal alloys that we don't know how to make today. But they could be lightweight. You can imagine in 300 years we'll know how to make plastic-type materials that are as light as plastic but would stop a 50 caliber bullet pretty easily. Just based on new engineering techniques we'll learn as we get smarter.
Yeah.
Now, the suits allow them to jump, leaps, maybe half a kilometer at a time, to move faster. They have grenade launchers, rocket launchers. They have their left arm has a huge monomolecular blade that comes out of it. They can use it hand to hand. Then the right arm has guns. They have a gun that pops out that's it's a hypervelocity automatic rifle, meaning that it's basically a little mini rail gun that's shooting rounds at near the speed of light. And when they fire them automatically, it creates ion trails through the air if they're in an atmosphere. And they're armor-piercing rounds because the aliens have shields and have armor as well. Then their helmets have visors that have various sensors and so on in it. But the biggest, coolest technology, I think, that I use in this whole series is what I call the direct to mind. And they don't need screens or buttons. They have a direct to mind link. So everything is displayed just in their mind around them and in front of them, as if they're looking at it. They can see it, and they can communicate direct to mind through quantum connectivity with the sensor. It's a little computer counterpart that each of them have in their head. This little implant about the size of a sunflower seed, and it's a supercomputer in there that's an artificial intelligence that's connected to everything else through the quantum links they have. And with that, if they say, I need to simulate this battle, then instantly the battle appears around them, that they see it in their mind, and they can tweak it and move it around and do simulations at super quantum computing levels. So imagine instantaneously how much problem solving every one of these Marines can do, every one of these soldiers can do at this time frame in the future. And to think that a force like that is outnumbered and is outgunned makes you really put in perspective how powerful an alien civilization that's been around for 1 million years might actually be.
Yeah. Well, this maybe it's a good time to talk about the Chiata. Why are they so nasty? Why are they so mean to us? What do they want?
Oh, it's not that they're mean to us. Imagine them like fire ants, but they're an aggressive, extremely rapidly populating species, and so they are continually moving outward in a population expansion wave. And it's just they've come to this part of the galaxy because they need the real estate, and they don't care about whoever's there. They use the real estate for resources or for a place to live, whichever is most suitable for them. And we just happen to be in the path.
So they're just sort of genetically or they're built as aggressive organisms.
Yes, however, I never go through how they came about. I'm assuming that they're in their natural state. They're just they started out, millions of years ago, overpopulated their planet, moved out through their solar system, moved on to their next star system, kept continuing to populate star systems and spreading out, and then when they finally started bumping into other civilizations and meeting resistance, they just would overpower them with numbers and take what they wanted. They have no particular morals other than a big stick.
Yeah. If so, all right. At the beginning of the story, we have Alexander Moore, who's also a continuing character. We got Deanna, and she's gonna be our stick, humanity's stick in a way. Alexander Moore's come a long way as a character. Let's talk a little bit more about the characterization, I guess. Who is he now? Who was he? Who is he now? He's really become the hope.
Moore really is my main character of this book. He really is. There are a couple of main characters and characters that have stayed in there forever, but Alexander Moore was the first character I envisioned for this story. Mm-hmm. And he was a senator from Mississippi, and he was going to a summit meeting on Mars to meet with the Martian separatists. Now, Mars is just another state in the Union, and there are city-states sort of on Mars, and these Martian separatists had been in a civil war. Mars wanted to be a free planet for decades, actually a century or so. And Moore, before he became a senator, was a major in the U.S. Marines and fought in the first Martian separatist attempt. Now, we only talk about that a little bit as backflashes, and one day it might be cool to go back and write Moore's story during what I call the Martian desert campaigns. So anyway, the very first day that Moore takes his wife and daughter to Mars, sort of as a working vacation to go to the summit, the leader of the Martian separatists, El Ami, decides that that's the day to perform an exodus and take all of her would-be followers and vanish from the Sol system. But they do that by having a few, tens of thousands of them sacrifice themselves as an invading army into the biggest city on Mars, which was Mons City, that's around Olympus Mons, which is really the size of Arizona. So you can imagine how big the city is. And so anyway, Moore gets caught up, and his family, they get caught up during this, and they fight their way to safety. And in the end, Moore decides that he could do more as a president than he could as a senator to stop this kind of stuff from happening again. So he decides to run for office and gets elected in the following books. The next two books, he's President Moore. And at the end of the third book, you think that it's all done with, and it's all just been humanity's unrest and civil war going on. But it turns out it was all a plan by the leader of the separatists. And I hate giving too many spoilers away in interviews like this, but it turns out it was all necessary in order to prepare humanity for the oncoming alien invasion. Mm-hmm. And Moore, since he's already done his terms as president, he goes to the now president and says, "There's an invasion coming. I want to lead it." And the president makes him, a five-star general in charge of the expeditionary forces to go and stop the oncoming invasion.
Yeah. Now, what is his? He's got this sort of dichotomy. He's dad to Deanna, who's also one of his best assets, and she's commanding this. She ends up at the David Rackman pilot.
Yeah.
And sending her into the hot spots. He's the dad that is worried about her, but he's also somebody who has to do that, right? When the time comes.
Yeah, and I kind of modeled him after some other presidents and great generals of our history who had sons that went to war. Their sons went to war during World War II, during Vietnam. All these types of things, and he's not the type who would pull strings to keep his daughter out of combat if she wanted to go to combat. And it turned out though Deanna was just so good at it that she like you said is the stick, and you have to, if you're going to win a ball game, you play your best athlete.
Yeah, even if it's your child and
type of turmoil this puts Alexander and his wife through.
Yeah. Which is, the fun of the book for us, but not for him. So, what's going to happen if we win? Where can you? First of all, is Deanna going to be able to adapt to peace? Is Alexander going to be able to do that? And what might lie ahead with this technology?
Well, so the technology has advanced so much so with these folks that unless they get vaporized, they can pretty much live through anything and live forever. But a lot of them get vaporized. But without giving too much away about this book, you can win a war by stopping the war, but there still might be bad guys left after the war. Mm-hmm. There are trillions of Chiata, right? There are only billions of humanity, and so it's obvious that there's sort of you might reach a stalemate or a brokered uneasy détente. But the way you would do that is still through border skirmishes, Cold War type tactics and things. So I suspect that Deanna and the families Moore, their work is still quite unfinished.
They're still out there. Let's shift gears a moment and just talk about some. What is the coolest science idea you've come up with lately, and how are you going to translate that into a story? Do you think?
Well, the coolest science idea that I've come up with lately.
Like just today of all, or whatever.
Well, that's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that, but the coolest thing that I've come up with lately is I've recently written a paper that shows that if you arrange a laser cavity a certain way, that theoretically you could create propellantless propulsion out of it. And I'm in the process of setting up experiments to prove if it's true or not. And if it turns out to be true, then all you need to move about in space is to have a power source. And it's much more efficient than rockets and much more powerful than anything like an ion drive or anything like that. In fact, analysis suggests that a device like what I'm talking about in the paper I wrote, you could use it to get to Mars in a matter of weeks to days, not years to months. And so I think that's pretty cool.
Well, that is pretty cool. Does it somehow get around Newton's laws of action and reaction, or is it something else that's going on?
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't. But a lot of people who are skeptical of it, that's the first thing they want to say. But no, it uses it's a general relativistic thing and a quantum physics thing that occurs that we've seen in nature, but we've never understood it in an effect called the Casimir effect. And it also happens. It's actually the reason why geckos can walk up a wall. They use a phenomena we used to call it van der Waals attraction, but we now know it's due to the quantum vacuum energy of the universe, the building blocks of the universe pushing against itself. And
so you're
just kind of where I am.
Creating virtual particles out of the vacuum kind of thing with this? Is that the idea?
Well, we don't really know. That's a theory. That's how this particular type of propulsion works. But what we do know is there have been experiments that show the concept works, but nobody has extrapolated it into a reason for why it works. And myself and a couple other scientists have written some papers that we believe we know why it's working, and we've extrapolated it into higher energy realms that would allow for much higher levels of propulsion.
Well, that's cool. So, all right. So clearly you've got a spaceship that can take us some places there. What are you working on at the moment? What's fiction-wise?
No, but I'm also working on using quantum entanglement to send encrypted signals. The Chinese just did an experiment from space where they claimed to have used quantum entanglement to transfer data from space to the ground. And I'm working on pretty much the same project to see if we can do that.
What books, what fictional works are you engaged in at the moment? What do we have to look forward to?
All right, so let's see. I just wrote the short story, Pain is the Fuel, which I really loved writing that story, and it's all about Deanna Moore, and I recommend people go read it before they get Bringers of Hell, because it'll give them some more insight into Bringers of Hell. Or you can read it afterwards, either one. I think it works either way. And then I think, I'm not 100% certain on this, but I think that Jody Lynn Nye and I are finished with the second book in the Moon series, or the Dr. Bright series, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
Which is a young adult science fiction story that takes place on the moon, about 75 years from now, and it's about this group of young scientists that live there and work there on a daily basis, and cool things happen, and they get into adventures kind of like Scooby-Doo in the game. And I really enjoyed writing that series, or those two books. Hopefully we'll do more.
Is that the race book, or is that
What's that?
Is that the moon race book where they have the big race around the moon, or is that
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's called Moon Tracks, or at least that's what we're calling it right now. And it's about the first race to circumnavigate the moon. It's kind of like an Alaskan Iditarod race or a desert Baja kind of thing. But this is to go all the way around the moon in a moon buggy. And it's the kids. I say kids, they're teenagers, and they join the race, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. What about solo projects?
Also, I just finished a story in John Ringo's Zombie Apocalypse Universe,
mm-hmm.
and it's for an anthology that's coming out. I don't know when that's coming out, but I've just finished it, and it's based on scenes in sequences of events in John's stories that are required in order to get the astronauts that are stuck on the International Space Station back down to the ground. And I tell the story from a NASA perspective and how they managed to keep them alive and figure out how to get them down. And by NASA, I mean about the 3 people that survived the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, that's a cool segment actually in the Black Tide Rising books when the ISS comes down, and they I guess that was your inspiration.
Well, they bring them down in the Dragon capsule that SpaceX is building, and what I do in this story is I start at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse they're at mission control, and the astronauts are on the space station, and you start seeing people turning into zombies here and there. Then everything falls, and then they're trying to figure out how to get the astronauts down, and there's about 3 people left at NASA, and they're all working, trying to stay alive and keep the space station communications going and figure out how to get them down. And so I think it turned out to be a pretty fun story.
That's cool. That anthology will no doubt be out at some point, probably 2019. So we'll look forward to that. Any novels you're working on?
Yeah, I'm about 2 chapters in on a new series called Ballistic, and it's a high action science thriller. It takes place like real, present day. So the tech is all. It's kind of like while you say it's a science fiction thriller, it's more of a science thriller like Hunt for Red October was. And it's about some bad guys that steal some Russian missiles with the nukes on them, reconfigure them, and use them to take the space station and hold the high ground and hold the planet at hostage by threatening to drop nukes from orbit if they don't do certain things. And that's turning out to be a lot of fun because I see this as Die Hard in space. That's
cool. That's cool. Yeah, I was excited when you were describing that before. I'm really looking forward to that one. I think your writing style just really fits with that kind of thriller aspect too. I think readers are going to love it.
Well, I certainly hope so. So far, I'm really enjoying writing what I've got done on it, but it's taken a lot of research. Mm-hmm. This one, since it is present day, I've got to get everything just right. And I've spent about 2 months just researching Russian nuclear missiles. And so I've gotten a lot of that right. And I'm having to design how would I retrofit or reverse engineer a Russian missile into a launch vehicle. And so all that is taking me a lot of extra work. And but I think it's going to really pay off in the end.
Yeah. Well, if there's anybody that can then get the science right, it's going to be Travis Taylor. So, anything else we want to say about Bringers of Hell that we may not have hit on?
Well, I got to tell you, I loved writing Bringers of Hell. There are so many fun sci-fi things in there and high science concepts, philosophies, and ideas, and there's so much just nonstop action. I mean, literally from page 1 to the last page is just nonstop, just fun action in the old school, fighter mecha battles, powered armor suit battles. I mean, it's every cool science fiction military conflict that you can imagine thrown into a blender and amped up to 11.
Well, I can attest for that. It is it's nonstop, and it's really good stuff. The book is Bringers of Hell by Travis S. Taylor, and it is out at booksellers everywhere right now. And Travis, thanks so much for joining us again.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
This is another entry in Alliance of Equals, a Liaden Universe novel by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Beset by the angry remnants of the Department of the Interior and challenged at every turn by opportunists on their new homeworld of Surebleak and low on funds, Clan Corval desperately needs to reestablish its position as one of the top trading clans in known space. To this end, Master Trader Sean Yoskalen and Corval's premier trade ship Dutiful Passage is on a mission to establish new business associations and to build a strong primary route that links well with existing loops and secondary routes. But reestablishing trade and preserving the lives of the few remaining members of the clan aren't all of Corval's problem. Matters come to a head as Dutiful Passage, accustomed to being welcomed and feted at those ports on its call list, finds itself denied docking and blacklisting while agents of the DOI mount armed attacks on others of Corval's traders under the very eyes of port security systems. Traveling with Dutiful Trader on this unsettling journey is Paddy Yoskalen, the master trader's heir and his apprentice. Paddy is eager to make up for time lost due to Corval's unpleasantness with the Department of the Interior, but she is also keeping a secret so intense that her coming of age and perhaps her very life is threatened by it. And here is the latest entry in Sharon Lee and Steve Miller's Alliance of Equals.
Sean paused by the flowers, closed his eyes, took a deep breath of lightly scented air, and sighed. As he understood local custom as practiced upon Langlest, Unette Hartensis had been only slightly forward in her attentions to himself. Had he been local, it would have been his part to be flattered by her favorable notice. In fact, he was flattered by her favorable notice. One was human, after all, and easily able to shield oneself from the warmth of her regard. Paddy, however. Sean sighed again. It had been very apparent that Paddy had felt the caterer's ardor, which rather inescapably brought him to the conclusion that his daughter was, indeed, a healer. That was, he thought carefully, gratifying. Certainly, if Paddy were to come into possession of her gifts during the reception, that might be awkward. However, he did not think she would do so. He had thought, since their flight down from the passage just this afternoon, when Paddy Yoskalen, who had been accustomed to thrill at the sight of a piloting board, sat her station with great calmness, competency, and no delight whatsoever. That there was more to this situation of gifts and stone and walls than met even a healer's eye. She might have been sitting a sim, save that her reaction time was appropriate to the demands of maneuvering the shuttle in real time and space. He had expected excitement, exhilaration, perhaps a moment or two of terror, all the sorts of things likely to be experienced by a young pilot still learning her wings. And all he had felt from her, beyond an early frisson of pleased anticipation, had been the concentration appropriate to a working pilot, and grit, sand, and stone. He had not dared probe too deeply and risk breaking the pilot's concentration. He dared not probe too deeply now, lest he create the very circumstance he wished to avoid. Stone. Walls, Lena had said, and he too had glimpsed something structured and dire. Plainly, Patty had been some time at this work, and, doubting the wisdom of creating such an edifice as he did, most stringently, he could not help but trust that it would hold. He knew Patty Yos-Gallen, the meticulous care she brought to her studies and her work. Whatever had motivated her to create such a thing, he did not doubt that it had been done with nothing less than thoroughness. That, of course, begged the question of how they, the elder healers, ought most wisely to proceed in the case. But that question was for after the reception, when they were alone in their rooms and free from the distractions of lusty caterers. It occurred to him then that Patty had not yet had her bed lessons, which would ordinarily be an easily corrected oversight, as Lena was fully capable as a teacher. However, this structure, this environment that Patty had created for herself until they knew what the child had done precisely. A clock chimed suddenly, very close by. Sharon took another deep, flower-scented breath, ran a healer's relaxation exercise, and opened his eyes. Unet Hartensis was moving toward the doors. He turned and found Patty coming toward him, looking perhaps a little wan. "Is all well, Trader Yos-Gallen?" he murmured. That earned him a small smile. "I believe so, Master Trader, but a word in your ear." She leaned forward, and he bent slightly, giving her his literal as well as his metaphorical ear. "Avoid the blue juice at all costs," she whispered. "It is dreadful." Tolly woke all at once, and wished he hadn't. His head felt like somebody had taken the business side of an axe to it, and his mouth tasted foul. For a moment, he just lay there, on a surface giving enough to possibly be his bunk, too craven to open up his eyes. "Tolly Jones," a voice spoke from overhead, a soft voice, if not particularly gentle, and lately very familiar to him. "Admiral?" he said. "Yes, I am pleased that you have regained consciousness. Inky predicted that you would do so at approximately this hour. She asked me to present this message to you immediately." There was a slight, but not too slight, pause before Inky's voice came through the ceiling speaker. "My most profound apologies, Mentor. It is a vile potion, but effective. Analgesics will tame the headache, and high C juice will make the mouth taste sweeter." Analgesics and high C, was it? He opened his eyes to the merest slits, and found that the dim light of his cabin at least made the headache no worse. "Where is Inky?" he asked the Admiral. "Aboard Ahab Azaius." That was a surprise. Why had the woman drugged him if she was... No, wait. You're not thinking, Tolly Jones. Think. "Where is Ahab Azaius?" he asked. "Now breaking dock," the Admiral answered. "Get Inky on comm for me." I am sorry not to be able to accommodate your request, Tali, the Admiral said. That sent a cold chill down a man's back. Inky'd set a mandate, had she? Well, all right. He doubted he had much civil to say to Inky now that he thought about it. Tali swung his legs over the edge of his bunk and waited for his head to stop spinning. Analgesics and juice are on the table, the Admiral said. Please, Tali, care for yourself. Well, this was a touching concern, and a little out of character for the Admiral. He wondered briefly what else Inky had been tampering with, and put the thought aside for more immediate concerns. Admiral, please get Tokal on comm for me. I am sorry, Tali. Tokal is not available to comm. His stomach hurt. He reached for the little bottle of pills, threw 3 down his throat, and followed them with a tangy swallow of high C. Please get Hazenthal on comm. Hazenthal is not currently available to comm, pilot. I am sorry. Worse and worse. He took another swig of juice, decided he was good to go, and got up on his feet, pleased not to wobble. Please open the hatch, he said. I'm going on dock. I regret that is not possible. We are in transit toward the jump point. Tali sat back down on his bunk, cold, all the way through. Destination? He asked, but he thought he knew the answer to that. The Lyre Institute office on Nostrilia. Raw fear hit him. He took a breath and pushed the fear aside. Return to Jemiatha Station. Jemiatha Station will not allow me to dock, Tali. You know this. Well, at least he should have suspected it, given the tenor of their last communication with Stu. Inky left a second message for you. However, she said that you must not hear it until you had showered, eaten, and, quote, felt human again, unquote. He closed his eyes, opened them, stood. All right then, he said flatly, and headed for the fresher.
That was another entry in the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com, to Baen intern Charlie Smith, and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz.
And a sunset tinted with blood orange rocket trails and sky blue pink jump ship vacuum impactions, plus the thanks and praise of an implacably starbound peoples to Travis S. Taylor, author of Bringers of Hell.
Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.